I don't remember the day it started. Not with Mark, anyway. With my husband. Well, I don't remember when that went bad either. It was like a slow leak in a tire, barely noticeable until you're on the side of the road. I'd look at him, and it was like staring at a blank wall. We went through the motions. Dinner, TV, bed, repeat. Then came Mark. My God, even his name was exciting, not boring and old-fashioned like my husband's. He worked at the gym. All muscle and smiles, and his eyes. They actually looked at me, not through me. It started harmless, a joke while I was on the treadmill, then him finding me to adjust my form. One day, running errands, I bumped into him. Coffee turned into lunch, and, well, you get the picture. I started lying to my husband. Small stuff, made up errands to squeeze in time with Mark. It was thrilling, like I was a teenager sneaking out, not some boring housewife. Mark wasn't rich or fancy, but Lord, he was alive. He touched me. He wanted me. It felt like waking up after years of sleep. One night, after a particularly amazing time with Mark, I came home high as a kite. My husband was in his usual chair, dead eyes on the TV. It hit me like a truck. What the hell am I doing? I wasn't a cheater. But I also wasn't going to give Mark up. A crazy idea came to me, something so twisted it was almost funny. Hey, I said, louder than usual to get my husband's attention. He looked at me, confused. I wanted to talk to you, I stammered. About something. Mark always found me after my workout, handing me a towel. One day, his fingers brushed mine as he passed it over. It was stupid, but my whole arm tingled. Later, I saw him watching while I was on the stair machine. A goofy grin, then a thumbs up. I felt 17 again. Flirting was like a muscle I hadn't used in years. My husband, he'd barely even notice if I shaved my head. Dinner was always on time, always bland, just like him. Mark asked me how my day was, wanted to hear me talk. I made up stuff, stories that made me sound more interesting than I was. After weeks of those little charges, a touch, a wink, my whole body felt like it was buzzing when Mark was around. I wasn't planning on anything happening, but I started working out longer, hoping he'd notice my new leggings or something. Stupid housewife stuff. One day, as I was leaving the gym, Mark was by the water cooler. Hey, you free for a quick drink? He asked, all casual. Like it was totally normal for a ripped trainer dude to ask some tired, middle-aged lady out. Sure, I blurted. God, I sounded like an idiot. Turns out, there's nothing like a beer at 2 in the afternoon to get things going. I talked, he listened, and pretty soon I was telling him stuff I hadn't even told a girlfriend in years. Before I knew it, his hand was on my knee, and I didn't pull away. Heading home, panic set in. What the hell was I doing? But even the fear was exciting. A little reckless, maybe even a little dangerous. That night, I lay wide awake, and for once, wasn't thinking of my boring husband. That kiss, it wasn't planned. Mark and I were just talking over drinks again after my workout, this crummy bar near the gym. It got late, place emptied out, and next thing I knew, it was like fireworks in my head. Finally, some proof that I wasn't completely dead inside. Things changed after that. I started wearing makeup to work out, stupid stuff like that. Mark found ways to touch me during training, correcting my posture and all. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. The sneaking around was like a game at first. Coded texts, quick coffee runs, for work. I was lying to my husband nonstop, and I almost didn't even care. One evening, Mark texted way later than usual. Can't sleep, meet me? Before my brain caught up, I was already in my car. We met at this secluded lake, someplace he knew from childhood. Sitting on the hood, just talking. Then he leaned in, and I didn't fight it. The kiss was messy and desperate, and I loved every second. Driving home, I felt high and terrified at the same time. I cheated. I actually cheated on my husband. It was so wrong, but there was this thrill under the guilt, a sense of power. I was in control of something, finally, even if it was twisted and dangerous. I hadn't felt this alive in years, even if I was heading straight for disaster. Once I started, I couldn't stop. Texting Mark all day, wearing clothes I knew he liked, all those little things that made the lie feel real. I think I was addicted to the rush of it. I became sloppy. Mark called me at home once, and I almost dropped the phone. I'd whisper to him on the back porch, leaving lipsticked coffee mugs in the sink. Wasn't I scared of getting caught? Yeah, but there was a thrill to the risk too, walking that tightrope. Something was changing in me. I held my head higher, stood straighter even when I wasn't at the gym. Usually, when my husband looked at me, I felt invisible. But lately, there was a flicker in his eye, like he was finally noticing something. New haircut? He asked one night. It wasn't even new, just styled differently. I almost told him the truth, that some hot trainer noticed me for the first time in ages. Instead, I just smiled. Another night we were watching TV, and my phone buzzed. Mark's name flashed on the screen. Before I could think, I hit answer, just for a second. Hey, babe, whatcha doing? I said, too sweet, too loud. Then froze. My husband was staring at me. Wrong number, I lied, slamming my phone down. He didn't say anything, just turned back to the TV. I was sweating bullets. Did he suspect? Was he playing me? The not knowing was almost worse than getting caught. But that twisted excitement was there too, the sense that I was in control. Or at least, I thought I was. Mark wasn't just some side thing anymore. I thought about him constantly. Imagining his hands on me, that look in his eyes that said I was desirable, alive. It became this sick need in me. He had to be mine, all mine. My husband, he was like a ghost. I barely noticed him anymore while my head throbbed with plans. How to get Mark alone longer, what to wear, how to make him want me more than anyone else. I even started fantasizing about them together, but with me in charge. It was a messed up power trip. Then, it hit me like lightning. I didn't have to hide anymore. Why sneak around, risking it all, when I could just change the rules completely? My mind raced. It was insane, dangerous, and the twisted little thrill of it made me giddy. One night, after dinner, I poured myself another glass of wine. My husband was settled on the couch, staring blankly at the news. Hey, I said, my voice a little too loud, too bright. He turned, the flicker of surprise in his eyes giving me a surge of confidence. I have an idea, I said, sitting down, feeling bolder than I had in years. About us, I mean, well, about me and Mark. He didn't say anything, just waited. What if, I took a deep breath, what if we didn't have to hide it anymore? What if we were all, together? The words hung in the air. My pulse pounded in my ears as my husband stared at me, his face a mask. Finally, he spoke. You've completely lost your mind. His voice was flat, cold. Maybe I had. But there was no taking it back now. His reaction wasn't what I expected. No yelling, no screaming plates thrown. He just got up, walked to the fridge, and poured himself a drink. It was unnerving, that calmness. You realize how crazy this is. He turned back to me, sipping his whiskey. Bringing your lover into our home? Honestly, I'm not sure if you're insane or just stupid. The words stung, but I refused to back down. I'm not crazy, I insisted. I'm just tired of the lies. This could work. Or it could destroy everything, he countered. And then, the thing that still haunts me. A ghost of a smile, gone as soon as it appeared. But sure. What the hell? Let's give it a shot. The next few days were a blur. Mark seemed confused, excited, probably a little scared. But I felt powerful, like a queen calling the shots. I pictured how shocked everyone would be, the whispers. It was delicious. My husband acted like nothing was different. He shook Mark's hand, asked about his work at the gym, also normal on the surface. But at night, I felt him watching me in the dark. A cold dread started settling in my gut as if I'd made some terrible mistake. One evening, my husband said he had a late meeting. I didn't believe him for a second. As soon as he left, a crazy thought took hold. I texted Mark. "Come over. Now." I was shaking as I waited. When Mark arrived, I practically dragged him upstairs. I felt sick, excited, desperate, all at once. There was a part of me that wanted to get caught, to see my husband's face, to make this whole mess explode. But, of course, nothing happened. My husband didn't come home early. Mark and I lay in my bed, and it felt wrong, awkward. And underneath all that? A sliver of relief. The first morning after Mark moved in was the weirdest of my life. He made coffee, my husband poured cereal, and I sat there like some ringmaster of this twisted circus. Awkward small talk over burnt toast, forced smiles. It was all so surreal, an off-kilter play we were forced to act in. But I refused to let it show. I started orchestrating things. A guy's night out for them, a double date at that cheesy Italian place for Mark and me, making it clear I was calling the shots. At work, I'd zone out, daydreaming of my friends' faces when they found out. This was my triumph, sick as it was. Power, finally, after all those years of boredom. At least, I told myself that. Because deep down, the dread wouldn't go away. My husband was too quiet, always watching with those dead eyes. And Mark, well, the thrill was gone, replaced by him snoring, the smell of cheap aftershave, his dumb gym buddy jokes echoing in the space that used to be mine alone. One day, I came home to find them drinking beers, laughing. My stomach twisted. Were they bonding? Over what? Me? The absurdity of it all? I started dropping hints, trying to stir things up, make them remember their places. Remember that move? I'd say to Mark with a wink, hinting at some inside joke. Or I'd casually bring up an embarrassing story to my husband about Mark's past fling. Anything to remind them who held the strings, whose twisted fantasy this was. One particularly bad night, I deliberately forgot to clear the dinner table until late. I walked in to find them watching a game, dirty dishes everywhere. The mess felt like a victory, a reminder that this was my home, and they were just guests in the chaos I created. But that night, lying in bed, the victory felt hollow. I couldn't sleep, the ceiling spinning. I felt out of control, like some kid who'd set a fire and now was just watching it spread. The whole house was a tinderbox, and I was the one holding the match. Worse yet, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to put it out anymore. Living with Mark wasn't just messy, it was invasive. He took over the TV, blasted awful music while I tried to work, and his idea of a home-cooked meal was ordering greasy takeout. The fantasy of the attentive lover? Gone. Replaced by an overgrown kid who thought I should be grateful for his mere presence. Worse than the bad habits was the attitude. He stopped even pretending to be sweet. He'd critique my clothes, the way I styled my hair. Always with a mocking edge that made my skin crawl. The thrill I'd chased was dead, leaving only the bitter reality. I'd replaced a boring husband with a cruel one. My husband, like a silent ghost, observed it all. The night Mark lashed out about my cushy life stands out. The rage in his eyes shocked me out of my own self-delusion. This wasn't rebellion. This was pathetic. I'd become the joke, playing mommy to a man-child, a twisted trophy on display in my own decaying home. Later, finding my husband smoking on the porch, a sight I hadn't seen in years, I felt a jolt of fear. "He's not what you thought, is he?" he asked. His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. I couldn't answer. To admit it aloud would shatter the last of my illusions. The truth was so ugly, so stupid. I'd sought excitement and found only degradation. I'd craved power, but in the end, I'd lost it all. The worst part? A sickening realization that this mess was my own making. Every lie, every reckless decision, had brought me here. I wasn't in control. I was trapped in a prison I'd built myself, and the warden had muscles and a bad attitude. I started noticing things. Little things at first, but they piled up like stones on a scale, tipping the balance. Mark's glass left empty when my husband refilled his own. A quiet chuckle shared between them about something I wasn't privy to. The way my opinions were brushed aside when the men discussed a movie or a news story. Alone with my husband, it got worse. Once, I found him reading a book about manipulation. Just sitting there, completely absorbed, as if it was a novel. Interesting read? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up, a slow smile creeping across his face. You wouldn't believe the things people are capable of. A chill ran down my spine. Was that a threat? He went back to his book, leaving me standing there feeling like a fool. Days blurred together. I moved through them like a puppet, playing the hostess in my own house. Each smile felt fake, and the dread gnawed at my insides. My confident plan had backfired. I'd willingly walked into my own humiliation. One afternoon, Mark announced he was going out with the guys, by which he meant my husband. An image of them bonding over beers while I sat alone made me want to scream. Instead, I took a long, scalding shower. Standing there, letting the water beat down on me, I finally let myself admit the awful truth. I was losing. Losing grip on the situation, on Mark, and worst of all, on my husband. His silent disapproval was far more effective than any screaming match. That night, I dreamt of tangled threads, a knot I'd made that I had no idea how to undo. I woke up feeling trapped, more so than ever before. The hunter was no longer me, the prey was, and I didn't know if I could escape my own snare. Mark changed too. His cocky grin didn't reach his eyes anymore. He complained constantly. The food wasn't right, the house was too stuffy, anything and everything to annoy me. It was like all that suppressed resentment from our secret days had suddenly bubbled to the surface. Then came the flirting. Stupid, obvious stuff at first. My husband refilling Mark's coffee, a hand lingering on his shoulder in passing. Nothing I could call out without looking crazy, but that look between them, it set my teeth on edge. One night stands out. They were drinking whiskey, a fancy bottle my husband usually saved for special occasions. Mark was on full charm offensive, and something in me snapped. So, tell me again how amazing your job is, I said, aiming for playful but landing on hostile. Mark scoffed. Not as amazing as sitting on your ass all day, he shot back, and then looked at my husband like it had been a secret joke between them. Jealousy was a bitter pill I'd never had to swallow before. Seeing another woman with my husband, that was one thing. But this? It was humiliating, a warped echo of what I'd done to them. Now the joke, it seemed, was squarely on me. The nights got worse. Mark would disappear with his buddies, or so he said. I'd find myself waiting up, not out of love, but fear. Fear of finding them together, fear of the gossip, fear of the whole thing blowing up and my husband kicking me out with nothing. My grand scheme left me less powerful than I had been at the start. A few times, Mark stumbled in late, reeking of beer and some cheap perfume that wasn't mine. The twist of the knife was watching my husband's face register it. No anger, just disgust, directed mostly at me. It was clear who he blamed for all of this. I started sleeping on the couch. Said it was my back, but really? It had to be less pathetic than sharing a bed with the disaster I'd made. Laying there, watching the ceiling fan spin, I was no longer the grand manipulator. I was the idiot caught in her own tangled web. I wasn't going to take this lying down. Mark moping, the husband's smug silence, every day felt like I was drowning. A part of me, a twisted, stubborn part, still clung to the sick thrill of control. If they wouldn't make a move, fine, I would. I got brazen, flirting with Mark at the dinner table, not caring who saw. Making sure my husband found my lingerie crumpled in Mark's gym bag. Childish stuff, but with each act of defiance, a little spark reignited in me. One morning, I went too far. Breakfast turned into a stage, me practically draped over Mark, giggling, feeding him strawberries. My husband sat completely stone-faced. He cleared his throat. Subtlety has never been your strong suit, has it? His voice was glacial, cutting through me. You want to talk subtlety? I snapped. After everything, I saw a red, finally, a reaction, even if it was pure contempt. The air crackled, and just like that, it all came spilling out. My resentment, the humiliation, the raw fear. Mark shifted uncomfortably, and I almost laughed, a bitter, ugly laugh. We were both just puppets in this, his strings cut now too. You think you're so clever, I hissed at my husband, but you're nothing. We're all nothing. You win. Is that what you wanted to hear? His face was a mask. Then, a smile that chilled my blood. Actually, you misunderstand. This is far better than anything I could have planned. Panic surged in me, what had I done? It wasn't a fight anymore, it was a trap, and I'd blindly walked right in. Mark looked between us, confused, almost scared. The sick realization washed over me, we played the exact roles his twisted little game needed. I stumbled out of the room, tears hot on my cheeks. Not tears of love lost, but of a fool who finally saw the bars around her, the ones she built herself. After that fight, everything shifted. Mark avoided me, no more snide remarks, no shared glances with my husband. It was like a switch had been flipped, and I was the only one who didn't see it coming. My husband's demeanor, it was even worse. Not openly hostile, but always there, a silent observer. He'd linger when I talked to Mark, or casually mention something he'd overheard. A reminder that I had no secrets in this house, no privacy of any kind. The paranoia gnawed at me. Were they colluding against me now? Was Mark in on it, part of the grand scheme to break me down? Sleep became impossible. When I did doze off, nightmares haunted me, my husband and Mark laughing, my face reflected in a shattered mirror. One evening, it all spilled over. Mark came home late again, and the rage I'd been suppressing boiled to the surface. What the hell is his game? I screamed at Mark, what did he promise you? Surprise flickered across Mark's face. Then, a hard edge entered his eyes. His game? You're the one playing games, lady. Don't you dare. I shrieked, the sound alien even to my own ears. You came here willingly, remember? Really? Remind me why, he said with a cruel smirk. Because a messed-up housewife was bored? Pathetic. His words hit harder than any slap. Humiliation burned through me. Had I been this blind? My grand rebellion. All it had done was expose me as a fool, desperate and pathetic. The rest of the night is a blur. Screaming, accusations, maybe I even threw something. All I remember is ending up alone, curled on the bathroom floor, gasping as if I'd been the one punched in the gut. My kingdom for an aspirin and the ability to turn back time. The cracks in our twisted arrangement had broken wide open, and for the first time, as I looked into the bathroom mirror, the person staring back looked truly, irrevocably. My hands shook as I tossed the last pair of wrinkled shorts into the suitcase. Not out of excitement, but something colder. Dread mixed with a simmering defiance. Brian was already sprawled across the hotel bed, a faint rumble of a snore rising. He looked so content, oblivious to the way our once bright tapestry of a marriage had faded to frayed threads. Can you believe it's been 5 years? My voice came out forced, too bright for the dim room. He mumbled, barely opening an eye. 5 years of paradise. He gestured sleepily at the faded floral curtains. Paradise. It used to be, kind of. The first time we came here. Giddy college grads splurging on this slice of oceanfront luxury. The gaudy patterns and musty smell didn't matter then. But now, it matched something inside me. Brian had already drifted back to sleep, sitcom actors flickering across his face. I sank onto the creaky armchair, foam clutched so tight my knuckles ached. Mark's last message waited, an unspoken invitation shimmering on the screen. We hadn't talked in a decade, yet the ease of our old banter flowed back. Laughter lines I'd forgotten about creased around my eyes as I reread his quips. Remember that time we TP'd the dean's house? I typed and hit send almost before I could second-guess myself. Rebellion was a foreign feeling. But tonight, with Brian's snoring and the scent of cheap room freshener choking me, it tasted a little like freedom. The reply buzzed back almost instantly. Don't think I'll ever forget that, or the look on your face when he caught us. A warmth I hadn't felt in ages spread through me. Someone remembered, saw that spark I thought had died out years ago. Brian's out for the count. Might grab a drink at that little beach place. I messaged back, my heart pounding a ridiculous little rhythm. Meet me there, margaritas on me. Mark's reply was a playful dare. I hesitated, then a recklessness fueled by too many years of carefulness surged through me. One drink wouldn't hurt, just a tiny break from this. Brian wouldn't even notice. The beach bar buzzed with the kind of energy our hotel painfully lacked. Mark stood under the twinkling lights, that same easy grin I remembered, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he saw me. 2 margaritas waited, their frosty salt promising a different kind of escape. You haven't changed a bit, he said, his voice low. He meant it kindly, but was that a good thing? So, my voice sounded small, the bravado that carried me through margaritas now fading. Kind of a wild coincidence, huh? A stranger leaned against the bar, watching us. Tall, with the kind of careless confidence that made him seem to own the space, even in faded jeans and a rumpled shirt. He pushed back a lock of dark hair and grinned, a glint in his eyes that wasn't aimed at Mark. It was aimed at me. More like fate, he said, his voice a low rumble that shot straight through my carefully constructed wall of indifference. Mark looked confused, then shrugged, heading back to fetch another round. Before I could protest, the stranger slid into the now empty seat beside me. Name's Alex. You look like you could use another drink. 100 warning bells went off in my head, the ones I usually obeyed. Yet, something reckless whispered that maybe, just maybe, rules weren't meant for tonight. He wasn't Mark. There was an edge to him, a hint of danger that was a million miles away from Mark's safe, predictable kindness. Yet, as we talked, that danger became its own sort of allure. He asked questions, not the polite kind about work and hobbies, but things that chipped away at the image of the perfect wife I'd built for the world. He seemed to sense the something lurking below the surface, the part of me screaming for a life less beige. Most couples I know, they can barely even look at each other long enough to order, he said, his gaze unervingly direct. His fingers brushed mine, a fleeting touch that sent a shockwave through me. He was right. Brian and I were more like polite roommates than lovers these days. The guilt gnawed at me. Just hours ago, I was on my hotel bed, steeped in resentment about my failing marriage. Now, some thrilling, terrible part of me couldn't look away from this stranger. He saw me, in a way Brian hadn't in years. Didn't try to fix me, just saw. Mark returned, snapping me back to reality. The easy conversation dried up, replaced by an awkwardness I hadn't felt since my first college party. Alex, sensing the shift, made his excuses with a half-smile that promised an echo in my memory long after tonight. The walk back to the hotel felt like a confession written in neon across the starlit sky. Brian would, of course, be asleep, oblivious to the chaos swirling inside me. But now, even the familiar creak of our room's door felt alien. It was a barrier to a life that suddenly felt stifling, a future that seemed written in invisible ink. Alex's words swirled in my head, fate, he'd called it. Tonight, fate felt less like a blessing and more like a curse. The first thing I felt was the unfamiliar texture of sheets. Not crisp hotel cotton, but something softer, with a lingering scent of salt and a cologne I didn't recognize. Then, the memory hit me with the force of a rogue wave. Alex, the bar, the way his midnight blue eyes held both laughter and challenge. A glance around the room confirmed it, not our bland hotel suite. Sleek, uncluttered furniture, artwork I'd never seen. My sundresses lay crumpled on the floor, a stark contrast to the room's cool elegance. Well, good morning, sunshine. My whole body jerked, I hadn't heard him come back. Alex leaned against the doorway, a lazy half-smile gracing his lips, a coffee mug in his hand. He looked absurdly at ease, as if waking up in a strange woman's vacation rental was his usual routine. Panic and thrill swirled in a sickening mix. Had I really? How could I? He set down the mug on the bedside table, a single sheet of paper tucked under it. My heart pounded in my ears. I couldn't meet his eyes. Don't panic on me now, he teased, but his voice carried an undercurrent of something colder. It chipped away at the reckless joy of the night before, replacing it with the icy realization of consequences. The room spun as I lurched toward the bathroom, bile rising in my throat. The image of myself in the mirror was a stranger, hair a mess, eyes rimmed with the remnants of last night's makeup, and a hollowness in my cheeks that no amount of concealer would hide. When I finally re-emerged, my phone buzzed. Brian, a cheerful text about his plans for the morning swim followed by a selfie of him beaming in his garish swim trunks. Guilt stabbed sharp and hot. Leaving already? Alex's voice had lost its teasing edge. I have to. I fumbled with my dress, fingers suddenly clumsy. He studied me silently, then retrieved the note from the table. Scribbled in bold letters was his name and a string of numbers. Call me, he said simply. It wasn't a request. Back in our room, Brian was a whirlwind of chipper vacation energy. Each word. About his swim, the breakfast buffet, the snorkeling tour he'd booked, fell like a stone. My replies were choked, the lie about an early beach walk, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Alex's text burned against my thigh where my phone was hidden. Last night was. His words echoed in my skull, a cruel reminder that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. My fingers trembled as I typed, perfect day with the hubby, under the selfie. Brian beamed next to me, the cheesy dolphin-shaped sunglasses I hated a testament to his unclouded happiness. Posting it felt like a betrayal worse than the night with Alex, a performance designed to deceive the world, and maybe even myself. Every step on the hot sand was agony, not because of the hangover pounding behind my eyes, but because the endless stretch of turquoise water no longer held a promise of escape. It was a looming symbol of my secret, a vast expanse where I felt dangerously adrift. Each time a man walked by with dark hair or a similar build, my breath hitched. Was it him? Was I hoping it was him? Or simply dreading it? You okay? Brian's voice broke into my chaotic thoughts. He was staring, not with suspicion, could he be so blind? But with a gentle concern that made my guilt flare hotter. Little too much sun, I think, I mumbled. Truth, but not the kind he imagined. It was Alex who burned on my skin, his touch a lingering ghost sensation. My phone, tucked away in my beach bag, was a ticking time bomb. Each unanswered text from Alex tightened the noose around my neck. Yet, the urge to peek, to steal another hit of his intoxicating attention, was an itch too powerful to ignore. Under the guise of fetching more sunscreen, I ducked back to our hotel room. The flimsy excuse, headache, rolled off my tongue with a practiced ease that terrified me. I locked myself in the bathroom, sinking against the cool tile as I finally dared to look at my phone. Texts from Alex flowed, playful banter, a photo of the same ocean view but from his balcony, questions that felt invasive and thrilling all at once. My replies were rushed, a desperate mix of exhilaration and shame. His messages were like an anchor dragging me out into a darker, stormier sea. That evening, with Brian's arm draped casually around me as we walked to the beachfront restaurant, I felt like an actress in a nightmare play. Every smile, every murmured endearment from him was a fresh wound opened by my duplicity. The once familiar scents of grilled fish and salty air were now tainted, overlaid with the memory of Alex's cologne the night before. "You're quiet tonight," Brian observed, breaking my trance-like state. Had I spaced out during his story? He looked hurt, which was 1,000 times worse than any suspicion. Was I losing my mind? The woman who'd come on this trip hoping to fix a marriage? Was she beyond repair herself? "Just need some air," I lied to Brian, a forced lightness in my voice. His smile wavered, the concern in his eyes deepening. It was a knife to the heart, but a necessary pain. Alex waited. The walk to our meeting spot was a blur. Guilt-ridden exhilaration battled within me as I ducked away from the tourist-packed Main Street, weaving through narrow alleys. Each glance over my shoulder felt like I was starring in my own suspense film, the soundtrack a frantic drumbeat of my pulse. The cafe was tucked into a forgotten cove, peeling paint, mismatched chairs, and an unmatched charm. Alex rose as I entered, the smile that took over his face igniting a traitorous response in me. It was an echo of how Brian used to smile at me, a lifetime ago. His questions cut deeper this time. Not the usual vacation small talk, but about dreams, regrets, those quiet what-ifs we usually bury. Things I longed to talk about with Brian. Yet it was this near stranger who pried them out of me. He didn't offer solutions, just listened. That careful attention, like a balm to my neglected soul, was its own kind of betrayal. "Tell me about that summer you interned in Paris," he prompted, his eyes never leaving mine. And I did, my voice a shaky confession of a bolder, brighter girl I'd abandoned for the safe, predictable life I built. His hand covered mine on the chipped tabletop. "You're still her," he murmured, his voice husky. I should have jerked away. But the warmth of his touch, the need echoing in his dark eyes, I froze. The rest of the afternoon blurred into stolen glances and secret smiles. This wasn't some fling. There was a frightening intimacy growing, fertilized by lies, and a desperation that was starting to scare me. Yet, it was thrilling. Addictive. Back at the hotel, the water pounding against my skin in the shower did nothing to wash away his lingering touch. Even more terrifying, it didn't wash away the wanting. I rejoined Brian on our balcony, a manufactured calmness draped over me like a flimsy robe. I could feel him watching me, not with accusation, but with a sad confusion he was trying to hide. "You okay?" "Nothing judgmental, just worry." "Fine, just tired," I snapped. Too sharp, too defensive. He flinched, the hurt twisting into something colder. Not anger, suspicion, was my charade finally cracking? Because that was a terror I hadn't prepared for. My phone became a constant, treacherous companion, tucked beneath my thigh at dinner, vibrating silently while I pretended to pay attention to Brian's stories about work. Each tap of Alex's messages against my skin was a little electric shock, a mixture of anticipation and a dread coiling tighter with each stolen text. That little village up the coast, Alex sent, followed by a picture of a cobbled lane with flower boxes spilling over windowsills. "Looks like something out of a storybook. We should check it out." My heart sank. Brian had mentioned that very same village days ago, his eyes lighting up with a nostalgic fondness I hadn't seen in ages. "Remember that one trip we never took?" He'd said wistfully. Now, Alex was proposing my fantasy escape, but under the worst possible circumstances. The lies snaked out with the practiced ease of a seasoned serpent. Meeting up with an old friend in that town became my excuse to vanish for a whole day. As I uttered the words, my reflection in the bathroom mirror stared back, eyes hollow, a stranger in the floral sundress now crumpled around my ankles like a discarded disguise. The day trip with Brian was a special kind of torture. I overcompensated, I laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm with a lingering possessiveness that made my skin crawl, initiated a kiss so fierce it left me breathless. All to cover the chasm of deceit that widened with every passing mile. Alex, in his stolen hours, was different. No pretending. It was heady and dangerous, reckless laughter echoing in hidden cafes, his hand finding mine in the shadowed theater where we snuck in to escape the afternoon heat. It should have felt perfect, yet every shared moment was tainted by whispers of, what if Brian knew? The drive back was a silent battleground. I stared out the window, scenery blurring, while the war in my head raged. Brian shattered, oblivious to the ticking bomb I'd become. Just one wrong word, a sidelong glance at the phone in my lap, and everything I'd built could shatter. A buzz. I fumbled, trying to seem casual. Can't stop thinking about you, Alex's text flashed back. As I hastily shoved my phone away, Brian glanced over. Everything all right? His voice held not a trace of accusation, just the mild curiosity of a husband used to his wife's distracted habits. Yet, in that moment, it felt like he'd seen straight through me. I was drowning in a sea of my own deception. Each lie didn't solidify my escape plan, it was another brick tied to my ankles. My sleep was a broken montage. Brian's worried frown flashing into Alex's grin, my own twisted reflection laughing cruelly back at me from dream mirrors. Did I even recognize myself anymore? My phone, once a device for the occasional meme or life update, was now a weapon. Alex's texts became demanding, his pet names laced with a possessiveness that made my blood run cold. When his suggested meeting spots grew bolder, a secluded beach known as a lover's spot, a midnight rendezvous that was sheer lunacy, I finally pushed back. Can't, I typed, the single word sending my pulse skittering. His reply was swift, brutal, don't play games with me. Playing games? The irony was a bitter pill. I was the one juggling dynamite, not him. That night, Brian's touch, a casual hand on my shoulder as I made dinner, made me jump like I'd been burned. He gave me that sad, understanding smile that cut deeper than any accusation could have. The guilt transformed into a writhing monster that gnawed at me from the inside out. Living the double life was like trying to hold my breath underwater, possible, for a while, but unsustainable. Missed calls from friends piled up. Work emails went unanswered. When I finally forced myself to pick up a phone, their voices held an echoey distance, like they could sense the chasm of secrets that yawned between us. A text popped up while I was grocery shopping, another elaborate excuse for stealing away to meet with Alex. I fumbled my phone. And then, the worst. What happened to that friend in the village, Alexia? Brian's name stared back at me. My vision swam. Had I said Alex's name aloud? When, how? The ground felt unsteady. I covered with a strangled laugh, typo, babe. Autocorrect is the worst, followed by a flurry of silly emojis. But the damage was done. The change in Alex was immediate. The sweet nothings in his messages curdled. A colder intelligence gleamed in his responses. No longer just a passionate fling. Now he was a liability, a potential weapon to wield against me if I stepped out of line. I wasn't in control anymore. That realization was more sickening than any motion of the rolling ocean waves that now made my stomach churn. The world had tilted off its axis. My sanctuary, the beach outside our room, was now a hostile land, each crashing wave a reminder of how deeply out of my depth I'd swum. Alex morphed from thrilling escape into a captor, his constant messages a chokehold, his veiled threats leaving me gasping. One reckless afternoon, I did what I never dared before, risked looking at his phone, left carelessly on the cafe table. It was like staring into a poisonous well. Names, sweet nothings, the same flirtatious banter he'd used to ensnare me. Not one woman, but a string of them, conquests, like notches on a belt. The jealousy wasn't what I expected, not rage, but a bone-deep disgust, mostly with myself. For falling for it, for becoming so common in his eyes. I was a fool, the worst kind, one who'd willingly walked into the trap. Back at the hotel, the mirror refused to lie. My haunted eyes, the new lines etched around my mouth, they belonged to a stranger. Makeup couldn't hide the ruin wrought in just these few days. This shattered creature wasn't Brian's wife, wasn't anyone's. Brian. His gaze was shifting. The worry lines around his eyes were now creased with accusation. Not yet a confrontation, but an uneasy silence where questions hovered unspoken, poisoning every bite of dinner, every shared TV show. Alex's relentless texts broke through my horrified trance. Tomorrow, the cliff path at sunset. Be there, not a request, an order, and an impossible situation. It was too public for him to do anything reckless, yet I knew deep down, ignoring him was no longer an option. Fear was giving way to something colder, calculation. Brian, the words stuck like glue in my throat. It was supposed to be a confession. Instead, it became a challenge. His eyes widened to fear, pain, and something like grim acceptance. That hurt me worse than any anger could have. I need to talk. Tonight, the click as I hung up the phone was the sharp crack of our breaking world. I'd always assumed shame would drown me. Instead, something akin to grim determination was rising, twisting with guilt, but propelled by a desperate need to snatch back some semblance of control. If everything was going to shatter, at least it would be on my schedule, in a manner of my choosing. I refused to be Alex's helpless victim, or Brian's pathetic, broken wife. My hands shook as I typed. This was a different kind of escape, a leap into a forbidding unknown. But at least this plunge, I would take on my own terms. The cove was an echo of all the bad decisions I'd made. Legend claimed a heartbroken girl drowned herself here centuries ago, her ghost still haunting the shore. I should have felt a flicker of fear. Instead, there was a warped sense of kinship with that spectral figure. I, too, had drowned in a sea of my own making. Alex didn't waste time on pleasantries. One look at my face, defiant, tear-streaked, and devoid of the naive adoration he craved, and his mask of charm shattered. He was all accusation and bluster, a wounded ego masquerading as fury. "What's this game you're playing?" he snarled, pacing the sand. One day hot, the next day ice. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" The question burned through me. Quietly at first, then rising to a crescendo that echoed off the cliff walls, I unleashed everything. The glimpse of his phone, the women, the sickening realization that I was just another notch on his pathetic scoreboard. The lies I spewed forth weren't a plea for forgiveness, but weapons. With each revealed truth, his power diminished. The surprise on his face curdled into rage, then something uglier. A calculated coldness. He grabbed my wrist, a bruise blooming before it even formed. "You think you can just walk away? I made you." That was the moment where the lingering terror snapped, replaced with a primal fury of my own. I wrenched free, the pain momentarily delicious. He was dangerous, yes, but a desperate dangerous, one who used manipulation, not brute force. In that split second, he became small. We battled not with fists, but with words. His veiled threats, my raw accusations fueled by adrenaline and a decade's worth of bottled-up rage. It wasn't pretty, it was raw and guttural, a symphony of brokenness played out on this desolate stage. Just when I thought my voice would give out, the shadows on the cliff stirred. A woman, older, her brow creased in a mix of curiosity and concern, was watching. I didn't cry for help, didn't play the victim card I'd clutched onto for too long. In the presence of a stranger, a bizarre sense of dignity returned. It turned out that facing Alex down alone was less terrifying than having him play the role of wounded lover for an audience. The fight drained out of him. It wasn't remorse, but self-preservation. Casting a last, venomous look my way, he slunk from the cove, disappearing up the path like a wraith receding into the dusk. My knees buckled the second Alex disappeared from view. It wasn't elegant. I crumpled onto the sand, sobs ripping through me. Humiliation warred with relief. Just moments ago, I'd been his prey, trapped. Now, despite the tremors racking my body and the sting of fresh tears, there was a core of defiance that felt stronger than anything I'd known in years. The woman who'd witnessed our scene didn't rush to comfort me. Instead, she lowered herself onto the cool sand a cautious distance away. "I'm Sarah," she offered, her voice surprisingly gentle for someone with such a no-nonsense air. My initial instinct was to retreat, to invent a new lie to mask the ugly truth. But with Alex gone, and my strength rapidly fading, I found myself spilling fragments. Alex, the words stuck in my throat, each one a shard of glass. Sarah didn't fill the silence with platitudes or easy advice. Her unwavering gaze was unnerving, yet oddly comforting. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said, "but if there's real danger, if he threatens you again." That "if" spoke volumes. She understood, maybe she'd witnessed scenes like this before, the wreckage of women caught in the snares of men like Alex. The drive back was surreal. Sarah's ancient sedan rattled along, the setting sun painting the sky with a garish beauty that mocked my inner turmoil. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't accusatory either. Brian, a pale, crumpled figure on the hotel balcony, jolted into action the second I emerged from Sarah's car. His first question wasn't about Alex, but choked with worry. "Are you okay? Where were you?" Confusion replaced relief the instant his eyes fell on Sarah. The confession that poured out of me wasn't a neat narrative. It was a jumbled mess: Alex, the lies, a fight on a cliff. And this woman, who'd become an unexpected protector. Brian's devastation was raw, mingled with a strange sort of protective fire when I described how Alex had grabbed me. Later, there would be apologies whispered, questions I had no answers for, tears. But what followed was the most unexpected turn. The police. Not to arrest me, but drawn by Sarah's discreet phone call on the drive back. Alex, it turned out, had a record. Complaints, dismissed, smoothed over, evidence that vanished just like the victims' voices. They listened to my story, but their focus was on him, the trail of manipulation he'd left behind. Our vacation became a different kind of crime scene. Detectives interviewed staff, combed through social media posts, built a case built on the ruins of my own. It offered a grim validation, but no easy fixes. Leaving wasn't an option, not yet. Brian and I were trapped in this limbo together. But even within those shared four walls, everything felt cordoned off. We circled each other like wounded animals, unsure of how to approach, flinching away from even the gentlest touch. pen_spark. The end of this story isn't tied with a neat bow. It's a jagged wound, slowly scabbing over. Some days, hope flickers. Others, I await gripped by the fear that forgiveness, of Alex, of myself, will forever remain out